Well, we hope you all had a very good lunch. And we move to the third session, in which we focus on the use of futuristic technologies in the judicial and digitization of judicial record. We are delighted to welcome on the dais the Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, Honorable Sri Justice Sanjay Kishan Kaul, Honorable Sri Justice P.S. Narasimha, Judge Supreme Court of India, Dr. Dinesh Katre, Senior Director and HOD of HCDC and CDAC, and Ms. Sharmishta Dasgupta, Deputy Director General, NIC, and Mr. Anshul Pandey, AI Researcher and Serial Entrepreneur. May I request Dr. Dinesh Katre to make his presentation, please.
A very good afternoon to all of you. Honorable Chief Justice of India, Dr. Justice Chandrachud ji, Honorable Justice Kaul ji, and Honorable Justice Narasimha ji, and the distinguished members on the dais, also the Honorable Chief Justices from the Supreme Court of India as well as the High Court and the legal fraternity. It is indeed an honor for me to be presenting the standard operating procedure for the digitization, or as we have called it as digital preservation. So it includes the digitization, storage, preservation, search and retrieval, and all the aspects including the policy framework and the best practices that we need to follow while going about the digital preservation of the judicial records. So these are the few objectives that we kept before us when we prepared the SOP. It should include the digitization of the records as well as the born digital electronic records, especially in the context of the threats of rampant technological obsolescence. As Winton Cerf, who is the father of internet, who invented the HTTP protocol, he says that information technology is very smart, but it is future imperfect. It is present perfect. It can cater to the scenarios for, let's say, next 2 to 3 or 5 years. But what is beyond 5 years? How our digital information will survive for next 30, 40, 50 years, and how we will preserve it, how we will retrieve it. So that is an important consideration. So therefore we have factored this particular aspect, and therefore we are not just calling it digitization, but digital preservation. Also, we require an interoperable implementation model and a trustworthy mechanism so that the digital records can be preserved at the Supreme Court of India as well as the 25 high courts and 672 district courts. So the canvas is very large, so we need a standard operating procedure which will encompass and cater to all the requirements. And the third objective is to basically comply with the international standards and best practices because the preservation can be achieved through third-party audit mechanism. So whatever we are storing and preserving, we have to get it audited by the authorized bodies, and who can basically alarm us if our digital data or the digital assets are at a threat of obsolescence. So these are the objectives with which we started. We conducted a number of surveys across the judiciary to basically estimate the volume of digitization that is required. We conducted the first survey and we received a response from almost 21 high courts, and we found that all the high courts put together, so far only 257 terabyte of data is available. That is the amount of digitization which has happened, which is less than the 5% of the total quantum of digitization that would be necessary in the judiciary. Also, it gave us an exposure of the multilinguality of records in the judiciary. Then we conducted the second and third survey, which focused on the volume of the records, the number of papers that have to be digitized at the high courts as well as at the district courts. And we basically requested for figures for the pendency, the institution of records or the cases in 2019, disposal in 2019, and the total number of disposed cases. So this helped us in basically estimating the overall volume, which also includes the projection for next 5 years, the volume of digitization that will be required. So even after weeding out 40% of the unnecessary records, the total volume of record papers that have to be digitized is turning out to be 3,108 crores. If we actually set out for digitization of this volume, this could be world's largest digitization initiative, because this is almost 30 billion pages have to be digitized. This is really massive. And it's going to require really major infrastructure and the tools and technologies, and all the support systems to have to carry this digitization and manage it, for over a long period. We also looked at the international trends, most notably the Joint Technology Committee report by the National Center for State Courts in the United States, and they have recommended that even their judiciary requires audit and control of digitally preserved records as per the ISO standard on trustworthy digital repositories, the ISO 16363. Also the Uniform Commissions, the Uniform Electronic Legal Material Act. So they have a the ULMA preservation group, and they also have come up with a report wherein they have mentioned that we require to really go for open archival information system, that is ISO 14721, and the trustworthy digital repository, that is ISO 16363. Also we looked at the British standard for the legal admissibility of electronic information, and so we tried to get an international perspective of the requirement and what are the trends. Also another notable achievement that has to be reported here is our ministry, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, initiated the National Digital Preservation Program in 2011, and as part of the Center of Excellence for Digital Preservation project, we actually succeeded in establishing a trustworthy digital repository, and globally we were the first to achieve the certification, that is ISO 16363 status was awarded to the repository which we had set up in collaboration with IGNCA. The second certification was achieved by the USGPO, United States Government Publishing Office, in 2019. So this is something which is the latest. It's a trustworthy mechanism of preserving the information over a long period. We also looked at the legal framework. I will not repeat this because you all are very familiar with it. Some of the most notable standards, which cover the aspects of security, search and retrieval, the legal admissibility, management of the digital records, how the digital records have to be converted and migrated, and preservation, and so on. The other important aspect here, which I must bring out, is the life cycle of records management has to be taken into account. As the electronic record creating systems should not be managing and archiving the records. What happens in India is the information which is created using the e-record making system is still lying in the same system. It has to be actually moved out, and it has to be stored into the archival systems in the trustworthy digital repository. So the trustworthy digital repository has several layers. It has to be driven by a policy. It has to be ownership from the top management. The audits are conducted by involving a third party. Every year there is a surveillance audit. There has to be data repurposing and value creation. So wherein all these big data analytics and the decision support systems, they basically capitalize on the data that is accumulated and preserved in the repository. Also the risk management, backup, disaster recovery. So all these various aspects are actually monitored and examined by the audit and certification body. As a result, our data remains safe, and it is then secured from the potential threats of obsolescence, because whether it is the server hardware or the software or the operating system or the file format, everything is changing. So along with these changes, it helps us in migrating and shifting our data in the current formats, and we can keep it accessible and retrievable. So we have proposed this model, which is very important. The judicial trustworthy digital repositories have to be established at the High Court level, and the district courts should digitize and transfer their records to the High Court, the judicial digital repository, where it will be preserved, because it requires a large ecosystem which is not possible to create at the district level. So it has to be done at the High Court level as well as the Supreme Court. It will require a lot of trained human resource. You will require digital archivists, digital curators, digital repository manager. So new roles have to be created. So the whatever IT staff that we may have, they will have to be trained and groomed into basically assuming these new roles. Also, policy for data storage has to be defined, so that what will be stored on the cloud, the online storage, what should go into the nearline storage, and what will be stored on the offline storage. So there has to be a policy, and accordingly this large data will have to be managed. As per our estimation, the total digitization, the access quality digitized copies of the records, the total size is estimated to be around 29 petabytes. All the high courts and the district courts put together, and on the disaster recovery side, where we store the high resolution images, that is going to be around 89 petabytes. So it is a huge data size, and this will require the data protection strategy. We will have to create the data centers for the data DR facilities, and based on the low risk seismic zones, we will have to select the locations where these DR sites could be created, and the multiple high courts could perhaps together store their data in these DR sites. So locations like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Jaipur, Ranchi, Allahabad, and Bhopal. So they are in the low risk seismic zones. We also conducted a data center survey across all the high courts, and we found that none of the high courts really have a proper cloud facility. They are using servers individually for different applications. So it is not really a cloud or like that. So you will require a cloud infrastructure at the high courts as well as the Supreme Court. So we have provided three options. Either you can go for a private cloud, which is your own infrastructure within your administrative control, or the second option is that you can procure the hardware but house it in the premise of the cloud service provider, where you have a lockable cage and biometric authentication to access it. And the third option is you could also go for the Meghraj like facility set up by NIC. So you may be able to choose from this. The number of software tools that will be required for this include the Judicial Digital Preservation System, which should comply with ISO 14721, a portal with distributed search and retrieval with access control, multilingual support depending on the regional languages that are prevailing in the records, the data tracking system, because the digitized records will be moving from the district court to the high court, and through various process of the approvals and checking and so on. So we should be able to track the data as it moves, digitization quality verification tool, and number of tools like LTO cataloging and so on, so which we have already envisaged and put into the standard operating procedure. So this entire effort is actually aimed at basically capitalizing the benefits of artificial intelligence and machine learning applications. So this will enable you, large data repositories will enable you in developing intelligent decision support, big data analytics for identification of similar cases, machine translation, cross-lingual search and retrieval, knowledge modeling, reasoning, and semantic linking, and so on. So all these benefits, if we were to reap, we will have to set up the trustworthy digital repositories. So one last important thing which I will mention and then conclude, that the hardware, software, and the digitization and the metadata, all things have to start simultaneously. If we believe that we will start the digitization and later on all these things will, software will come later, hardware will come. So it should be done with a proper synchronization. That is a very important point. With this, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brother Narasimha. And this was a very fascinating session. Dr. Katre, Dr. Ms. Sharmistha Dasgupta, and Anshul Pandey, Dr. Anshul Pandey. Thank you very much for all your presentations, and of course to my distinguished brother and colleague, Justice Narasimha. Thank you.